All right, so today we're diving into Judge Judy's courtroom.
Oh, my goodness.
Dissecting some of her most memorable cases.
I love Judge Judy.
You shared a compilation of clips.
Yes.
And I have to say,
Yeah.
there's some serious drama brewing in these clips.
Absolutely.
I am so excited to unpack all of it.
Yeah.
Maybe extract some unexpected life lessons along the way.
Well, these small claims cases offer a glimpse into everyday conflicts and the legal principles that underpin them.
What better guide than Judge Judy herself?
Right.
We're starting with a case I've dubbed the vet visit from hell.
Oh, boy.
Just imagine this.
Okay.
A frantic cat owner
Okay.
rushes his injured cat to the vet,
Mm-hmm.
only to run headfirst into COVID protocols
Oh,
he was completely unaware of.
the pandemic certainly added a layer of complexity to everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as this case shows, even routine interactions could quickly escalate into full-blown conflicts.
So we have Mr. Wheat, who says his cat is bleeding out,
Oh, my goodness.
heading straight for the vet's door
Okay.
and completely bypassing the required curbside check-in.
Uh-oh.
This naturally leads to a heated argument with the vet assistants,
Okay.
Ms. Hensley and Ms. Schilling.
Mm-hmm.
Accusations start flying, spitting, hair pulling, even a body check.
Oh, my.
It's pure chaos.
And of course, with these types of cases, we often run into the he said, she said problem.
Oh, for sure.
Without clear evidence, it really becomes a matter of credibility.
Yes.
And who Judge Judy finds more believable?
The transcript is a goldmine
Okay.
of these cringeworthy moments.
Yeah.
At one point, Mr. Wheat is told there's no vet on duty,
Mm-hmm.
and he responds with, I needed to get the R out of there.
Oh, no.
Then when one of the assistants tries to address his yelling,
Right.
he tells her to shut up.
Oh, I mean, his frustration is somewhat understandable given the circumstances.
Right.
But that language definitely doesn't help his case.
Yep.
It raises the question, does the perceived urgency of a situation justify aggressive behavior?
Yeah, does it?
Yeah.
And it all culminates in this bizarre scene where he claims Miss Schilling body checked him.
Oh, wow.
She claims he yanked her scrub top,
Goodness.
and both of them allege they were slapped by the other.
Oh, my goodness.
It's a mess.
That's where the impact of stress on perception comes into play.
Oh, yeah.
Even if everyone is being truthful,
Right.
their interpretations of the events might be completely skewed by the heightened emotions of the moment.
And that's where Judge Judy steps in, right?
Yeah.
She listens to both sides, looks at the evidence,
Yeah.
including photos of their injuries,
Wow.
and then uses her sharp wit to cut through the drama.
It's fascinating to see her in action.
It is.
She acknowledges that Mr. Wheat was likely high energy and
Yeah.
not totally composed,
Sure.
but she also points out inconsistencies in his story,
Yes.
especially regarding those COVID protocols.
There's this one key moment
Okay.
where she asks him a seemingly simple question.
Okay.
If you believe there was no vet on duty, why didn't you just get into your car? And his answer
Yeah.
is evasive.
Wow.
You can practically see the wheels turning in Judge Judy's head.
That question goes beyond the immediate situation, doesn't it?
I think so.
It's about logic, consistency,
Right.
and whether his actions align with his claims.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ultimately, she dismisses the case, stating that one man's emergency is not another man's emergency.
It's a reminder that personal responsibility doesn't simply vanish in stressful situations.
It doesn't.
You can be upset, but it doesn't give you carte blanche to behave inappropriately.
So what can we take away from all of this?
Yeah.
Besides double-checking those COVID protocols,
Right?
it's a good reminder about the importance of clear communication,
Absolutely.
especially in those high-pressure situations.
Yes.
How we choose to express our feelings really matters.
I think it also highlights the dangers of jumping to conclusions.
Oh, yeah.
We often fill in the gaps in information with our own assumptions,
Right.
which might not always be accurate.
Ready for a case that's a little less physically aggressive,
Sure.
but just as twisted?
Bring it on.
Great, because our next case involves wigs, online orders, and a stolen credit card.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, and did I mention the emojis?
Oh.
We're calling this one wigging out over online orders.
This one is interesting because it touches on the complexities of online business
Right.
and the unique challenges of proving fraud in a digital world.
We meet Mrs. Dio, our wig entrepreneur, who is suing Miss Taylor, a salon owner, for 5 wigs purchased with a stolen credit card.
Oh, wow.
Miss Taylor, of course, denies ever buying the wigs,
Okay.
claiming Mrs. Dio must have mistakenly sold them to one of her clients.
Right from the start, we see this clash of perspectives where both parties believe they're the victim.
And things get even murkier when we learn the order was placed under the name Joyce.
Okay.
And shipped to Miss Taylor's email address.
Oh, boy.
Mrs. Dio presents copies of the order confirmations.
Okay.
But Mrs. Taylor claims she doesn't know any Joyce and says she lost her phone. So she can't provide any other contact information.
This really underscores the importance of due diligence in online transactions.
Oh, yeah.
Both for businesses and consumers, keeping detailed records can be crucial in resolving disputes.
But wait.
Right.
The plot thickens.
Okay.
Miss Taylor's boyfriend decides to join her in court.
Oh.
And his testimony reveals some interesting details about their finances.
Okay.
He claims to pay the bills while she pays the rent. Which raises questions about their financial arrangements.
Right.
And whether they're trying to shift blame.
His involvement seems more detrimental than helpful.
Oh, I think so.
Especially when his statements directly contradict what Mrs. Taylor had previously said.
And then the emojis.
T-emojis.
Mrs. Dio presents Mrs. Taylor's Twitter account.
Okay.
Where she brags about receiving over 2,000 in wigs.
Wow.
And even writes, "I'll be wrong if I dispute it once I get it," followed by a laughing emoji.
Oh, my goodness.
Judge Judy, in classic form, calls her out for relying on emojis as a defense.
Wow.
Stating, "It's just an emoji, I don't care."
Oh, my goodness.
That is a direct quote.
This illustrates how digital communication, especially the informal nature of social media, can be misinterpreted or used against you in a legal setting.
But there's a final twist.
What?
Mrs. Taylor mentions slow-rolling clients.
Oh,
and it comes out that these clients were actually her boyfriends.
Oh, wow.
He was allegedly using her to get the wigs.
Oh, my goodness.
And then not paying.
Oh, my goodness.
Talk about a tangled web of deceit.
This case really showcases how personal relationships can complicate business dealings.
It does.
It emphasizes the importance of vetting your partners.
For sure.
And understanding the risks involved.
In the end, Judge Judy rules in favor of Miss Dio. Okay. Awarding her the cost of the wigs, court fees, and even the cost of hiring a private investigator.
Wow.
So what can we learn from this wig saga?
Well, for starters, caution is key in online transactions, particularly large purchases.
Especially.
And if you're running an online business, solid record-keeping practices and systems for verifying payments and identities are essential.
Essential. Yeah. It's also a reminder that honesty and transparency are crucial in any business dealing.
Right.
Deception, whether through stolen credit cards or fabricated stories, will inevitably catch up with you.
Absolutely.
Okay, next up we have a case that hits closer to home.
Okay.
Literally. We're calling this one Love, Money, and a Totaled Car.
Oh, boy.
And it all starts with a messy breakup.
The intersection of romantic relationships and shared finances. A recipe for potential complications.
We have Hannah Berman, who is suing her ex-boyfriend, Ryan Turnell, for the down payment on a car they bought together. Okay. Hannah claims she put down $6,000 for this car, even though it was in Ryan's name because she didn't have a license.
Right.
Shortly after their breakup, the car gets totaled, and Ryan receives a $6,000 insurance payout.
Oh.
You'd think he'd return Hannah's money, right?
One would assume so.
Yeah.
Especially given the short duration of their relationship and his primary use of the vehicle.
But there's a twist.
Oh.
Ryan claims he used the insurance money to pay off medical bills from the accident.
Okay.
And cover his rent. Judge Judy quickly sees through this.
Okay.
Pointing out that if he had money for rent and medical bills, he certainly had the money to return Hannah's down payment.
It raises the question.
It does.
Even if he needed the money for other expenses, did he have an ethical obligation to prioritize repaying his debt to Hannah?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it gets messier.
Okay.
Hannah's also suing Ryan for assault.
Oh, wow.
Alleging he shoved and swung at her during an argument that happened in a park after their breakup.
This adds another layer to the case, highlighting the importance of boundaries and respect, particularly after a relationship has ended.
Hannah shows photos of bruises on her shoulders.
Okay.
And swelling on her head. While Ryan only has a minor injury to his mouth.
Oh.
He claims each E was the one assaulted.
Oh.
Alleging that Hannah punched him twice after he pushed her.
Again, we encounter the he said, she said dilemma.
Yeah.
Making it challenging to discern the truth without clear evidence.
But here's the clincher.
Okay.
Ryan admits to pushing Hannah first.
Oh.
Judge Judy, in her inimitable style, points out.
Right.
Well, you didn't expect her to give you a kiss after you pushed her.
That statement succinctly captures the concept of consequences.
Yes.
Actions have repercussions, and you can't expect a positive response after initiating aggression.
Judge Judy ultimately rules in Hannah's favor.
Okay.
Awarding her the $6,000 down payment.
This reinforces the importance of financial accountability,
yes,
even in personal relationships.
Absolutely.
And of course, it sends a clear message that physical aggression is unacceptable.
What can we take away from all this? First, when it comes to shared finances with romantic partners.
Yes.
Clear agreements and thorough documentation are crucial.
Absolutely.
Second, breakups can be emotionally charged.
They can.
So prioritizing respectful communication and boundaries is paramount.
Yes.
And lastly, actions have consequences and aggression will never be justified.
It's also a reminder that legal recourse can help achieve justice and hold others accountable for their actions.
All right, ready for a case that's a bit more
furry.
Intrigued. You got it. This next one involves a landlord, a tenant, a French bulldog puppy, and some questionable breeding arrangements.
Oh my goodness.
I'm calling this one Puppy Love Gone Wrong.
Ah, yes. The intersection of pet ownership and legal agreements can be quite a tangled leash.
We meet Mr. Parker, the landlord, who's suing his tenant, Mrs. Miles, for the price of a French bulldog puppy.
Okay.
Mr. Parker claims he initially agreed to sell the dog for $2,500. But after Mrs. Miles moved in, he bumped up the price to $3,500.
This raises the issue of verbal agreements and their enforceability.
Right.
The importance of clarifying terms and getting everything in writing before a transaction cannot be overstated.
Mrs. Miles claims the price change was due to a co-ownership arrangement, where they would split any profits from breeding the dog in the future.
Oh, boy.
Mr. Parker, however, vehemently denies ever agreeing to such a deal.
This highlights the complexities of pet ownership, particularly when breeding is involved.
Oh, yeah.
Clear contracts outlining ownership, responsibilities, and financial arrangements are absolutely essential to avoid disputes like this one.
To make things even more interesting,
Mrs.
Miles is countersuing for harassment and invasion of privacy.
Oh, wow.
She alleges Mr. Parker is constantly knocking on her door.
Okay.
And has even installed cameras on her neighbors' properties to keep tabs on her.
This introduces the concept of landlord-tenant boundaries and the importance of respecting a tenant's right to peaceful enjoyment of their rented property.
Judge Judy quickly cuts through the noise, focusing on the core issue, the dog's price. She finds the sudden price increase after Mrs. Miles moved in suspicious.
Right.
And doesn't buy the co-ownership story.
This speaks to the need for evidence to back up claims, especially when accusations of dishonesty are involved.
Mrs. Miles argues she can't afford the full $3,500 because she's unemployed and struggling financially. Judge Judy, however, reminds her that those personal circumstances are not Mr. Parker's responsibility. The debt is owed regardless.
It's a reminder that while empathy for individual situations is important, it doesn't negate legal and financial obligations.
Judge Judy rules in Mr. Parker's favor, awarding him the $3,500. However, she dismisses Mrs. Miles's counterclaim for harassment. Finding your accusations ridiculous.
It highlights Judge Judy's ability to discern legitimate claims from those that might be exaggerated or used as a deflection tactic.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Even though she rules in Mr. Parker's favor, she decides that Mrs. Miles gets to keep the dog.
Oh, wow.
But she won't receive the AKC papers. Effectively ending any breeding plans.
It's a fascinating example of Judge Judy's pragmatism.
It is.
She recognizes the bond between Mrs. Miles and the dog while still holding her accountable for the financial aspect of the agreement.
So what are the key takeaways here?
First, clear communication is crucial in any agreement, particularly when it comes to money and pets. Second, financial difficulties don't excuse you from meeting your obligations. And lastly, maybe think twice before entering into a co-ownership arrangement with someone you don't know very well.
Good advice.
It also underscores the importance of carefully choosing a landlord.
Yes.
And being aware of your rights as a tenant.
Okay. Are you ready for another wild one?
Absolutely.
This time we have an almost ex-husband. His soon-to-be ex-wife boyfriend. A missing key. And a questionable trespassing charge. Get ready for stepmom, boyfriend, and a trespassing charge.
Divorce proceedings and blended families. Sounds like a recipe for potential legal fireworks.
We meet Frank Adonis, who is suing his wife's boyfriend, Willie Albro, for filing a false police report and harassment.
Oh, wow.
Willie is living in the house.
Yeah.
Frank still partially owns with his estranged wife.
Immediately, we see the potential for conflict.
Oh, yeah.
Emotions are running high.
For sure.
Boundaries are blurred.
Absolutely.
And the situation is intensely personal.
Frank claims he went to the house to pick up his son for a prearranged visit.
Right.
Because his wife had taken his son's key.
Okay.
He went inside to ask for a copy.
Oh.
Willie, however, calls the police.
Oh, my goodness.
Accusing Frank of trespassing.
Oh, my God.
And wait for it.
What?
Domestic violence.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
That escalation is a prime example of how quickly personal grievances can become entangled with legal disputes.
Judge Judy, with her signature perceptiveness, picks up on the simmering resentment and says to Willie,
Yeah.
You understand why he might be annoyed?
Right.
With him living at a house he owns.
It shows her ability to acknowledge the emotional realities of the situation while still focusing on the legal aspects of the case.
Frank tries to argue that he's entitled to a key because he owns half the house.
Okay.
Judge Judy swiftly shuts this down,
Of course.
pointing out that if he really needed a copy,
Yeah.
he could have easily made one from his own key.
This demonstrates Judge Judy's talent for recognizing inconsistencies and attempts to manipulate the situation.
Then comes the moment that makes you want to yell at the screen.
What happened?
Frank claims he didn't know the locks had been changed.
Okay.
But Judge Judy brilliantly retorts, Mr. Adonis, you'd have to be a two-process thinker, sir,
Oh, my goodness.
before you give me a lot of baloney.
Wow.
She cuts him off mid-sentence,
Wow.
stating, so far, you're in the wrong. And let me tell you why.
Okay.
She then lays out exactly why his actions constitute trespassing. He knew he didn't have a key, entered the house uninvited, and had no right to be there.
This showcases the clarity of the law in this situation.
Exactly.
Trespassing is a serious offense, and Frank's justifications simply don't hold up.
Case dismissed.
A clear-cut legal violation.
This case offers valuable reminders for anyone dealing with divorce, blended families, or even just tense neighborly relationships.
Right.
Respect boundaries.
Yes.
Don't enter someone's property without permission,
Yeah.
especially if there's a history of conflict.
It is.
Keep your emotions in check.
Right.
And don't let personal grievances escalate into false accusations or legal battles.
Exactly.
And remember,
Yeah.
Judge Judy is always watching.
Indeed.
Okay, we have time for one more case before we wrap up part 1 of our deep dive.
Okay, let's do it.
This one takes us back to roommate drama,
All right.
but with a twist,
Okay.
a restraining order.
Oh, boy.
Get ready for roommate rage and a restraining order.
This case promises to be fascinating.
Oh,
The complexities of conflict resolution, the power dynamics of legal protections,
yes.
and the potential fallout of false accusations all come into play.
We meet Ryan Hastings,
Okay.
who is suing his former roommate, Peyton Kammer,
All right.
for his security deposit, the value of his belongings that were allegedly thrown away,
Okay.
and for filing what he claims is a false restraining order.
Right from the start, we see multiple layers of conflict.
Yes.
Financial disputes interwoven with claims of harassment
Yeah.
and potential abuse of the legal system.
Now, Ryan and Peyton's living situation is a bit ambiguous.
Okay.
They claim to be just roommates,
Mm-hmm.
but there are hints of a more complicated past.
Okay.
They knew each other for several months before moving in together,
Okay.
and their arguments seem to go beyond typical roommate squabbles.
This ambiguity adds a layer of complexity.
Right.
It raises questions about their relationship dynamics and how those might color their perceptions of events.
Peyton claims she was terrified of Ryan, describing him as emotionally volatile and prone to angry outbursts.
This underscores the importance of feeling safe in your own home.
Yes.
When that sense of security is threatened,
Right.
it's natural to seek legal protection.
The restraining order stems from an incident where Ryan and Peyton argued about chores.
Okay.
Peyton claims Ryan threatened to go crazy on her,
Oh, wow.
raised his fist,
Oh, my
and began shaking in anger.
goodness.
Ryan, however, claims he was just shaking because I wasn't being listened to
Oh, boy.
and was trying to maintain his composure.
This difference in interpretation is crucial.
Yeah.
The same action can be perceived in vastly different ways,
Absolutely.
depending on the individuals involved
Right.
and their emotional states.
Judge Judy, being the master of reading between the lines, picks up on Ryan's description of his behavior
Yeah.
and says, well, that would frighten me.
Right.
She then asks him, did the judge say to you, how would you describe shaking in anger because you weren't being listened to?
That question challenges Ryan to consider how his actions might have been perceived by others.
Sure.
Especially in a context of escalating conflict.
Ryan's response is evasive.
Okay.
And Judge Judy concludes that based on his own testimony,
right,
the judge who issued the restraining order had reasonable grounds for doing so.
Okay.
She dismisses that part of Ryan's complaint,
right,
effectively validating the legitimacy of Peyton's fear.
This aspect of the ruling highlights the serious nature of threats.
Yes.
And the power of restraining orders to prevent potential harm.
Yeah. However, Judge Judy rules in Ryan's favor regarding his security deposit.
Okay.
Ordering Peyton to return the $682.
Okay.
Since there was no damage to the apartment.
It demonstrates Judge Judy's thoroughness, even within a multifaceted case with conflicting claims.
Right.
She meticulously separates valid requests from unfounded demands.
As for Ryan's claim that Peyton threw away his belongings, that part gets a bit messy.
Okay.
He lists various items, including a bed, a Nintendo Switch, and a hookah.
Wow.
But admits he doesn't actually know she has them or not.
This highlights the importance of substantiating claims with concrete evidence.
Right.
Without proof, it's challenging for a judge to award compensation for alleged losses.
Judge Judy ends up dismissing most of Peyton's counterclaims as nonsense.
Okay.
Except for her request for a month's rent.
Okay.
It turns out Ryan was late on his rent for September.
Oh.
Which coincidentally amounts to the same $682 he's getting back in his security deposit.
It's a final twist that demonstrates Judge Judy's commitment to fairness.
It really is.
Both parties end up in the same financial position they were in before their conflict escalated.
So what have we learned from this roommate roller coaster?
Well, first, choosing your roommates wisely is key.
It is.
Living with someone you barely know or have a history of conflict with can lead to disaster.
Absolutely.
Second, clear communication is vital. Addressing issues early on before they spiral out of control. And lastly, if you genuinely feel threatened, don't hesitate to seek legal protection through a restraining order.
Really good advice.
It also serves as a reminder that legal processes, while powerful tools for protection, shouldn't be misused for personal gain or revenge.
And that's a wrap on part 1 of our Judge Judy deep dive. Stay tuned for part 2.
I can't wait.
Where we'll explore even wilder cases, including daycare drama, a macaw tragedy, and a loan dispute that will leave you shaking your head.
Oh my goodness.
See you soon.
Bye. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Judge Judy. We've already uncovered some fascinating cases that highlight the complexities of human relationships, finances, and the law, but trust me, we're just getting started.
Oh yeah, we've got a whole lineup of courtroom showdowns just waiting to be dissected.
Yeah.
And our next case takes us into the realm of childcare, where things get a little, well, let's just say parental opinions can be very strong.
This case definitely raises some important questions about the responsibilities of childcare providers, the rights of parents, and that delicate balance of trust that's so crucial in these relationships.
Get ready for daycare drama in the eaten steak analogy. We meet Shanice Grimm, a home daycare provider who is suing her client Dallas Lee for unpaid childcare fees. Seems straightforward enough, right?
On the surface, perhaps, but as we delve deeper, we uncover layers of accusations, conflicting perspectives, and some truly memorable Judge Judy analogies.
Dallas claims she didn't pay for the final 2 weeks of service because her children were neglected and wrongfully disciplined, while in Shanice's care, she alleges that her 3-year-old son was slapped by Shanice's teenage son, and her 1-year-old daughter was bitten by another child.
Those are serious allegations. Parents entrust childcare providers with their most precious possessions, their children. Any breach of that trust is understandably met with concern.
Dallas presents a text message from Shanice informing her about the biting incident. But Judge Judy doesn't give it much weight. She points out that Dallas kept her children in Shanice's care for weeks after that incident, suggesting it wasn't a significant enough concern to warrant immediate action.
It raises an interesting point about consistency. If Dallas truly believed her children were at risk, one might expect a more immediate response.
And to complicate matters further, Dallas reveals that Shanice sometimes left the children in the care of her husband, which wasn't part of their initial agreement.
This brings up the issue of informed consent. Parents have the right to know who is caring for their children, and any deviations from the agreed-upon terms should be addressed.
But Judge Judy doesn't seem swayed by Dallas's excuses. She delivers her famous eaten steak analogy, which boils down to this. If you eat the steak, even if you don't like it, you still have to pay for it.
It's a humorous analogy, but it effectively illustrates the principle of accepting responsibility for your choices. Dallas could have removed her children from Shanice's care at any time, but she continued to utilize the service, thus incurring the obligation to pay.
Now, Dallas's father, Gary, enters the scene trying to defend his daughter's actions. He claims Dallas had no choice but to keep her children in Shanice's care because she had to work, and he works full-time too.
This touches on the challenges many families face when it comes to balancing work and childcare, especially single parents or those without strong support systems.
But Judge Judy, in her characteristic no-nonsense style, gives Gary a dose of tough love. She points out that there's always a choice when it comes to your children's safety.
It's a powerful message about the importance of prioritizing children's well-being above convenience or financial constraints.
She suggests that if Gary was truly concerned, he could have helped his daughter find alternative care or even stayed home with the children himself until a suitable arrangement was found.
Her words emphasize the importance of stepping up and taking responsibility, even when it requires personal sacrifice.
She dismantles Gary's argument piece by piece, highlighting the inconsistencies and reminding him that if you work, you get paid.
This underscores the principle of fairness and the importance of honoring agreements in both professional and personal settings.
Ultimately, Judge Judy rules in Shanice's favor, awarding her the $600 for the 2 weeks of unpaid care. She dismisses Dallas's counterclaim, deeming it ridiculous, and reminds her that she chose to leave her children in Shanice's care despite her concerns.
It's a reminder that while childcare providers have a responsibility to offer a safe and nurturing environment, parents also have a responsibility to be proactive in addressing concerns and ensuring their children's well-being.
What can we take away from this daycare drama? Clear communication and transparency are essential in any childcare arrangement. Parents should clearly outline their expectations, and providers should be upfront about their policies and practices.
It's also a good reminder that if there are concerns about the quality of care, address them promptly and be prepared to explore alternative options if needed.
And of course, remember Judge Judy's eaten steak analogy. If you utilize a service, even if you're unhappy with it, you're still obligated to pay for it.
It also highlights that legal options are available for both childcare providers and parents when agreements are broken or when the welfare of children is at stake.
All right, ready for a case that's a bit more, let's say, feathered. This one involves a beloved pet macaw, a neighbor's dog, a hole in a fence, and some conflicting accounts of a tragic incident. We're calling this one a macaw, a pit bull, and a hole in the fence.
This case delves into the complexities of pet ownership, property boundaries, and the often difficult task of determining liability when animals are involved.
We meet Patricia and Giovanni Nunez, who are suing their neighbor Scott Elam for the cost of their macaw Penelope, who was tragically killed by Scott's dog Bella.
Right away, we feel the emotional weight of this case. The loss of a pet can be devastating, especially under such traumatic circumstances.
Patricia describes Penelope as a therapy bird, helping her cope with a recent illness. She paints a vivid picture of the attack, describing Bella chewing her up and dropping her and biting her again.
Her testimony underscores the deep emotional bond between humans and their animal companions. It reminds us of the profound impact such a loss can have.
The central question here is how Bella got into the Nunez backyard. Patricia claims there was a hole in the fence that Scott had failed to repair despite repeated requests.
This introduces the familiar challenge of conflicting accounts, making it difficult to establish a definitive timeline of events and determine who bears the ultimate responsibility.
Scott, however, presents a different version of events. He claims the hole was dug by the Nunez own dog, Lucy, and that he'd repeatedly repaired his side of the fence only for Lucy to dig another hole. He argues that it was their responsibility to contain their dog and prevent further damage to the fence.
His argument introduces the concept of shared responsibility when it comes to property boundaries and preventing potential harm. It raises the question of whether both parties had a role in maintaining a secure barrier.
Patricia insists that it was Scott's dog, Bella, who was the aggressor, constantly digging under the fence and entering their property. She even claims she caught Bella inside her house on a previous occasion.
This back and forth makes it challenging to determine the root cause of the problem and who bears the greater responsibility for preventing the tragic incident.
As always, Judge Judy cuts through the noise. She points out that regardless of who dug the hole, Scott was aware of its existence and knew that his dog had a history of digging under the fence and entering the Nunez property.
Her observation emphasizes the concept of foreseeability. If a potential hazard is known, there's a responsibility to take reasonable steps to mitigate the risk.
She reminds Scott that even if the Nunez dog initially damaged the fence, it was his duty to secure his own property and prevent his dog from escaping.
This reinforces the principle that pet owners are ultimately accountable for their animals' actions, regardless of contributing factors.
Judge Judy delivers a memorable line. If your dog has a problem and their dog has not come onto your property, but your dog comes onto their property, then you have to say, you know what, I'm not letting my dog go out unsupervised because it has created trouble in the past.
Her words perfectly encapsulate the concept of proactive responsibility. Scott had ample warning that his dog posed a potential risk and he didn't take sufficient steps to prevent harm.
Judge Judy then draws a powerful analogy asking Scott who would be responsible if Bella had bitten Patricia while she was trying to retrieve her from her house. The answer, of course, is Scott.
This analogy highlights the principle of strict liability in pet ownership. The focus is on the actions of the animal, not the intent of the owner.
Judge Judy concludes that the fact that a bird rather than a person was harmed doesn't diminish Scott's responsibility.
It underscores the inherent value of all living beings and the importance of holding pet owners accountable for the actions of their animals regardless of the victim.
She rules in favor of the Nunes, awarding them the full $4,300 for the cost of Penelope.
The ruling serves as a stark reminder that pet ownership comes with significant responsibilities. Failing to fulfill those responsibilities can have serious consequences.
This case offers several valuable takeaways for pet owners and neighbors alike. Be aware of your property boundaries and take steps to maintain a secure fence if your dog has a history of digging or escaping. Take extra precautions to prevent them from accessing other properties.
It also emphasizes the importance of open communication with neighbors and a willingness to collaborate to address potential problems before they escalate into legal disputes or result in harm.
Okay, we've covered vet visits, wig scams, totaled cars, puppy drama, and even a macaw tragedy. Ready for one more case before we wrap up part 2 of this Judge Judy extravaganza?
Absolutely. My curiosity has piqued. What other fascinating human dramas await us in the Judge Judy universe?
This next case involves family loans, unpaid debts, and some truly questionable moral math. Get ready for a loan a granddaughter and some very bad math.
This case promises to explore the complexities of family obligations, the boundaries of financial assistance, and the consequences of exploiting those boundaries.
We meet Essie Young, who is suing her granddaughter's father, Keith Buchanan, for an unpaid loan. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Keith and Essie's daughter. The mother of the child were never married and don't even live together. Essie has had custody of her granddaughter for 11 years, and Keith rarely visits. So why would she loan him money?
That's the question that immediately springs to mind. It seems counterintuitive, especially given their strained relationship and his apparent lack of involvement in his daughter's life.
Well, it turns out Essie did it for her granddaughter. She says her granddaughter begged her to help Keith, saying, "Grandma, would you please help my dad?" Essie, being the loving grandmother she is, couldn't say no.
This highlights the powerful influence of family bonds, particularly the love between grandparents and grandchildren. It also introduces the potential for those bonds to be exploited.
Keith claims he asked Essie for the loan because he needed to buy a car. But Judge Judy, always skeptical of convenient explanations, starts digging deeper.
Her skepticism underscores the importance of scrutinizing motives and seeking the truth behind seemingly straightforward requests.
She asks Keith why he would ask Essie for money when he has a wife who works, and presumably her own family. Why not ask them for help?
This question challenges Keith to justify his actions and explain why he chose to target Essie, who has already shouldered the responsibility of raising his daughter.
Keith's response isn't exactly flattering. He claims he asked his wife's family first, but they couldn't help, so Essie was his last resort.
His explanation comes across as weak and self-serving, further raising suspicions about his true intentions.
Judge Judy points out that Keith could have simply taken out a loan from a bank, but Keith claims he couldn't because his credit is not all that great.
This excuse, while potentially valid, further reinforces the impression that Keith may lack the financial stability to manage his own affairs.
So how much did he borrow from Essie? $2,000. And how much did he pay back? A mere $912. And here's where the math gets really bad.
I have a feeling Judge Judy is about to deliver one of her signature takedowns. She's not known for her patience when it comes to financial shenanigans.
You got it. Keith claims he gave Essie the $912 from his tax return, but then he drops this bombshell. I owed backup child support, so she got that money that he owed her for child support for taking care of his daughter, and he wrote that off of the loan.
Wait, what? Did he just try to justify repaying a loan with money he already owed for child support? That's audacious, to say the least.
Judge Judy's reaction is priceless. She says, "What is that? Something wrong with your mind?" And then with impeccable timing, she declares, "That's the dumbest thing I've heard today."
It's a classic Judge Judy moment, perfectly capturing her ability to expose absurdity with a blend of wit and righteous indignation.
Judge Judy meticulously breaks down the math, highlighting the absurdity of Keith's logic. He owed Essie $2,000 for the loan, plus he owed her $900 in back child support. Paying the $900 he already owed doesn't magically erase the $2,000 debt.
Her explanation emphasizes the importance of basic financial literacy and the principle of honoring obligations. Debts don't simply disappear because they're inconvenient.
Unsurprisingly, Judge Judy rules in Essie's favor, awarding her the full $2,000.
The ruling reaffirms the principle that family ties don't excuse financial irresponsibility. It also sends a strong message that exploiting the kindness of others, especially family members, has consequences.
This case serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of mixing family and finances, especially when dealing with individuals who have a history of financial instability or questionable moral judgment. It also highlights the importance of establishing clear agreements and documenting all transactions, even when lending money to family members.
It reminds us that legal recourse is an option when agreements are breached, even when those agreements involve loved ones.
Welcome back to our Judge Judy Deep Dive. We've covered everything from vet visit meltdowns to wig-fueled fraud to messy breakups and roommate showdowns.
It's been quite a journey through the landscape of everyday conflicts and the legal principles that come into play.
Absolutely, and we're not done yet. We have one last case to unpack, and it's a real head-scratcher. This one involves a grandmother, a granddaughter, and a father who seems to have a unique understanding of financial responsibility.
Family dynamics and finances, always a potentially volatile combination.
We're calling this one A Grandmother's Loan and a Father's Creative Accounting.
The title itself hints at a clash between familial expectations and personal accountability.
We meet Mrs. Young, a grandmother who has been raising her 12-year-old granddaughter for most of her life. The granddaughter's father, Mr. Buchanan, is in the picture, but only sporadically. He's never been married to Mrs. Young's daughter, and they haven't lived together for years. So you can imagine everyone's surprise when Mrs. Young reveals she loaned Mr. Buchanan a significant sum of money.
That's certainly an unexpected turn of events, given their limited contact and his apparent lack of financial stability. It seems unusual for Mrs. Young to extend such a financial favor.
And Judge Judy picks up on this right away, asking Mrs. Young, "Why would you loan him money?"
That question gets to the heart of the matter, prompting Mrs. Young to explain the emotional motivation behind her actions.
Miss Young explains that she did it for her granddaughter. The young girl had pleaded with her to help her father, who claimed to be in dire need of a new car.
This sheds light on the powerful influence of family bonds, especially the love between grandparents and grandchildren. It also raises the question of whether Mrs. Young was acting in her own best interest.
Judge Judy, never one to let things slide, questions Mr. Buchanan about why he would ask Ms. Young for money when he has a wife who works and presumably her own family to turn to.
It's a valid point. It challenges Mr. Buchanan to explain his reasoning and reveal his true intentions.
Mr. Buchanan's response is weak. He claims he asked his wife's family first, but they couldn't help. So Mrs. Young, the woman who's been raising his daughter for over a decade, became his last resort.
His explanation seems disingenuous and opportunistic, suggesting a lack of respect for Mrs. Young's generosity and her financial situation.
Judge Judy then probes further, asking why he didn't simply take out a loan from a bank.
Right.
Mr. Buchanan's excuse: "My credit is not all that great."
This response, while potentially true, further reinforces the impression that Mr. Buchanan might not be the most responsible when it comes to finances.
So how much did he borrow from Miss Young? $2,000? And how much did he pay back? A paltry $912.
This is where I suspect things are about to take a turn for the absurd.
You're absolutely right. Mr. Buchanan tries to explain that he gave Mrs. Young the $912 from his tax return, but then he adds this little gem. "I owed backup child support, so she got that money that he owed her for child support for taking care of his daughter, and he wrote that off the loan."
Hold on a moment. Did he seriously try to use his back child support payments as credit towards a separate loan?
Yes, he did. And Judge Judy's reaction is priceless. She looks at him with a mix of disbelief and amusement and says, "What is that? Something wrong with your mind. Did you just say to me, am I crazy?"
It's a classic Judge Judy moment. She has an uncanny ability to cut through nonsense and expose the absurdity of a situation.
Mr. Buchanan tries to defend his logic, claiming he wasn't aware he owed back child support until it was deducted from his tax refund. But Judge Judy isn't buying it.
Right.
She sees right through his attempt to deflect responsibility and manipulate the situation.
Exactly.
She patiently explains to him that owing child support is a completely separate issue and has no bearing on his responsibility to repay the loan he owed Ms. Young, $2,000 for the loan, plus the $900 in back child support.
It's a simple concept, but one that Mr. Buchanan seems to have trouble grasping. Judge Judy highlights the importance of separating different financial obligations and honoring commitments regardless of personal circumstances.
Judge Judy sums it up perfectly with a touch of her trademark sarcasm. So you owed her $900 plus $2,000. Are you not following me? Am I getting something wrong here?
It's a rhetorical question, of course, but it effectively underscores the flawed logic and lack of accountability in Mr. Buchanan's actions.
The verdict. Judge Judy rules in favor of Miss Young, awarding her the full $2,000.
Justice is served. The ruling reinforces the principle that family ties don't excuse financial irresponsibility, and it sends a clear message that exploiting the kindness of others, especially family, has consequences.
This case is a cautionary tale about the potential pitfalls of lending money to family members, especially when there's a history of financial instability or questionable decision-making.
It also emphasizes the importance of clear agreements and documentation, even when dealing with loved ones. Putting things in writing can prevent misunderstandings and protect everyone involved.
And never underestimate the power of common sense and a healthy dose of skepticism when it comes to financial matters.
Judge Judy's wisdom shines through in these cases. She consistently advocates for personal responsibility, honesty, and a clear-eyed understanding of the law.
Well, that concludes our deep dive into the world of Judge Judy. We've explored a diverse range of cases, witnessing the good, the bad, and the utterly bewildering aspects of human behavior.
It's been a fascinating exploration of conflict ethics and the importance of approaching disputes with a sense of fairness and accountability.
Remember, as Judge Judy often says, beauty fades, dumb is forever. So always strive for knowledge, wisdom, and a touch of Judge Judy's no-nonsense spirit as you navigate the complexities of life.
And never be afraid to stand up for what's right and hold yourself and others accountable for their actions.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another insightful journey into the human experience.